Once again, I find myself here talking about the conservative Christian right. And I know, I've talked about this before. I've already stated to myself and to everyone who has watched my podcast on that topic that, you know what, they are a huge pain in my ass. But yet again, they still seem to find their way into my home and then anger me, and then here I am ranting about them again. And I know what you're thinking. You know what, Allon, you need to calm down, watch your blood pressure, let it go. Trump's out of office. It's all good now. But on second thought, that isn't the case. Because even with Trump out of office, Republicans and conservative Republican Christians are still going to be around spreading their propaganda. Now, what brings this up, you may ask? Well, I got some mail the other day, and I found this paper in my mail. The Epoch Times, Truth and Tradition. It was the January 1st through 7th issue. Now, as you can see, this looks like a real newspaper. It feels like a real newspaper, I can tell you that. It smells like a real newspaper. It's folded like a real newspaper. And therein lies the problem. Now, I'll get to that later. But I want to break this down because I saw this in the mail. And at first I thought it was a Times and Transcript newspaper. So I was like, okay, whatever. Threw it on the table. And then I looked at it. And I began to skim the headline articles. So let me read a couple of these articles to you. 500 million donation from Facebook Zuckerberg used to undermine U.S. election. That's one of them. The main headline, Canada pension money keeps pouring into China as risks escalate. Side article headline, Canada at a crossroads facing an aggressive Beijing. Ties between Canada's elite and powerful and the Chinese regime. Now, you may be thinking, well, you're not Chinese, Allon, so what does it matter to you? Well, first off, any minority group that's being targeted affects me because I'm a minority and I'm in that group. So I can't very well sit here and claim to be a proponent and a defender of minority rights if I'm not going to defend everyone, even if most Asians think they're white. But that's a whole different story. We'll get to that later. Maybe not today, but it's an issue of mine, and that's a whole other thing. But if you look at this paper, again, this paper looks like a real paper. And like I said earlier, I threw it on the counter thinking it was a Times and Transcript issue. And that is a huge, huge problem because anyone who is not educated enough to know better would think this is a legitimate newspaper, that these articles are legitimate, especially here in New Brunswick where we have such an old, aging population. A lot of them still swear by the Times and Transcript. They still read the paper. That is the demographic that's keeping Times and Transcript alive. And these individuals are not super educated, no offense. They're not worldly. They don't know to look closer at something that looks like a newspaper. And they're going to read this. And unfortunately, that same demographic has the same ideology and the same mindset as the articles that I just read off to you. Now, for me, as a black man, the Facebook donation is the article that got me. Because this article goes on to say that Facebook somehow, some way, tampered with the election in the United States. And because of this tampering and this money that Zuckerberg apparently gave to the election process to certain states, that this in turn is what influenced and shifted the election in favor of Joe Biden. Now, we already know that there are plenty of conservatives here in New Brunswick who agree with that sentiment. And this article is speaking right to them. Now, I've read the article. The article is very loosely written. The article talks about money being given for fair election programs. Well, guess what? You wouldn't need fair election programs if you weren't fucking stopping black people from getting to the polls. So that ex-nays that article. But the China article is a different issue. We here in New Brunswick claim that we welcome immigrants from everywhere. We encourage immigrants to come over here and to settle here. We want them because we need workers and we need to make the aging population demographically and statistically become younger and have more families stay here and settle here. And we have a huge influx of Asians that do come to New Brunswick and settle here. So if you've got individuals who are conservative reading articles like this, who already may or may not like or approve of the immigration policies of New Brunswick. This is feeding dangerously into their narrative. When you have article after article on your front page talking about Canada succumbing to the Chinese regime, to aggressive Chinese policies, to Canada pension money pouring into China, that is specifically aimed at the older, less worldly, and sometimes extremely ignorant and biased population of New Brunswick. And this is a very, very dangerous thing to have. So this bothers me greatly because this came into my house. I didn't go looking for this. But the fact that this came through Canada Post, and we have 750,000 people here in New Brunswick, that means 750,000 people in New Brunswick got this piece of shit newspaper. And I guarantee that a good portion of them are going to read it and not think twice about it because, again, like I said earlier, it looks and feels and smells like a newspaper. But the far Christian right, what do they have to do with this? Well, if you read this paper, it is steeped, as they say in their tagline, truth and tradition. Those are fancy-ass words to say that I am a far-right conservative Christian who doesn't give a shit about anybody else but my white Christian values. That, again, is another problem for a person of color. Because if they're going after the Chinese like this, it's only another step or a half a step before it's a newspaper about blacks, a newspaper about Latinos, a newspaper about women, a newspaper about LGBTQ, trans people. It's only a half step, and not even, before this kind of propaganda gets spread. So I am not happy with this at all. I didn't ask for this propaganda to be sent to my home. They actually have a subscription, so if you're into this type of shit, you can actually pay them money. Listen, I am sick and tired of the Christian right trying to shove down their way of life in everyone's throat. You want to live the way you live, fine. Live the fucking way you live. But to go ahead and to step in the throats of minorities and other people to get your point across, I mean, I guess that's just religion's way, and it's always been that way. Since the Crusades, it's always been that way. Religion was introduced to the slaves to keep them in check, to make sure that they always answered to a white authority. But I got to tell you, it's getting old, and I really, really hope that in 2021, and this generation that is here now gets the point, and I really hope to see movement in the arena of just pushing this nonsense out of the way. Because the far Christian right does nothing but judge and condemn people and hold them to a standard like religion does that is just impossible to live by. And they themselves don't live by it, which is even the bigger issue. So anyway, that's my rant for this week. Probably not what you expected, but if you did receive this paper in the mail, I will say burn it, shred it. If you didn't know what it was and it's still sitting in your home, take a look at it. See what kind of shit's in there. But if you agree with it, fuck you. But hopefully you don't. That's my rant for today. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.